Hello, this is Natasha from Earth Mother Star Child, Natasha Astara, and today's podcast is going to be about empaths. I set this up originally as daily clearing for empaths to help people who are empathic, really kind of like as a survival guide, I guess. But I thought I would talk a little bit more about what it is to be an empath and what the experience here on Earth is actually like. So, what is being an empath? I should look up the usual definition in the dictionary, but for me, it's about just being very hyper-aware, being able to feel very distinctly other people's feelings, emotions, and the emotions, feelings of animals and environments, that it has an effect on me. So I'm extremely sensitive to changes in my vibration outside of my environment and how it has an effect on my internal state, whether I feel good or bad, or whether it can make me feel drained or make me feel uplifted. So it's a very heightened sensitivity, a heightened state, and you can have different sorts of empaths. So I wrote down some types of empaths that I know of. Now, this is not to say this is not an exhaustive list. If you have your own experience of being empathic, then please, get in touch. I'd love to hear. So types of empath, you can get an emotional empath, like someone who's very sensitive to other people's emotions and emotional states. You can have a physical or medical empath. Now, this is something I worked out through my own acupuncture practice, actually, is that as people came in for acupuncture sessions, I became more and more aware that when they were talking, my body was responding to their bodies. So it started off that I would just get a tingling sensation and be able to very much be in tune with what they were describing to me. So if they were describing having a sore neck or a sore knee or something, I found that my own knee was tingling, and I was able to describe or fully understand the area that they were describing, or the sensations they were describing, and be able to describe them back to them, sometimes without them even saying. So it was a very interesting connection, and I can extend this to when someone says, "Oh, I've got a sore back," and I have to palpitate the area, and I look at the back, and I'm immediately drawn to the areas which need attention, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's just the spot." So people can say, "Oh, that's just, whatever," but actually it really is a skill. I do it day in, day out, and I've done it with hundreds of people. So I would call that a physical and medical empath. So the reason I added medical was because I also noticed as my practice went on, I was able to start feeling the points. So someone would come in for treatment, and they still do, and I would be sensing the points on my own acupuncture points and locations on my own body. So when they were talking to me, I would get a very strong sensation around, heart 3, heart 1, liver 1, lung 1, these even on the face, and I would be aware that these points were the ones that energetically on my clients' bodies were the good ones to choose for that treatment. So obviously that took me a few years, because I would ignore them. Firstly, this is usually all for empaths. I would ignore it and just think, "Oh, that's just me." And then I began to write them down. And as I mixed these points into the treatments, often I would need good reasons for doing so. That would be my process. And over time, I began to realize that my treatments were much better when I used this wisdom, this knowledge that was being communicated to me through my body. So it actually enhances my practice, because we don't always see the whole picture. And when we are diagnosing, we will see a certain picture, a certain part of it, but often we don't understand the full complexity of what's going on. And I found that when my body was speaking to me, it was interpreting a resonance from the client that I was treating. So it has become very, very useful in my practice, and it's meant that I've been able to help people in ways that maybe I wouldn't have done before, and I always get great feedback, so that's always worked for me. So that's a a medical and a physical empath. So on that same note, I know people who are very physically empathic. So I had a friend who sat in my car seat, and I gave them a lift somewhere. Then I had a family member who sat in the car seat, and they said, "Oh, my tooth." And they described the feeling of extreme sensitivity around one area of their teeth. And what had happened was the friend that had sat in the car seat before them had a friend that had broken their front tooth in another country and was worried about it. They'd actually talked about it in that space. And it was exactly the same area that this family member was telling me, and they could describe how it felt, and even had a bit of information on how to heal it. So that was an interesting experience, but it just showed me how we can be physically empathic and carry vibrations and illness usually of others and not realize it. So once, that was a bit of a chain, but this happens all the time. So you can sit in a seat that someone else has sat in, and you can actually begin to feel the illnesses and unwellness that maybe that person has had. In the same light, you can sit in a seat of a very happy, joyful, radiant person and still feel that happy, joyful radiance. But you might see it more as an uplift in your own energy rather than a draining. So another type of empath is a geomantic empath, which I don't know if that's the right word for it really, but what I meant by that is someone who's very aware of geopathic stress in their environment. So if you have you can get sick building syndrome, can't you? And I've definitely worked in offices where people have been very sick and the building's been sick. And what I would suggest there is that this awareness, this empathic quality to the feelings of the environment. So it can even be the land, can be office buildings, any building actually. And people are very much aware of the stress, the trauma, the vibrations that are held in that land, which are not healthy. In the same light, they can be very vibrationally aware to the healthiness of it. Like if you're near a spring of water, a fresh water spring, sometimes I feel like that energy going all the way through me. It feels very bright and bubbly and happy and very light, and I can really feel very good after spending time in that area. So geopathic stress, and geopathic stress is very interesting. I might do a podcast on it because it does affect all of us, and people don't realize, but it's a mixture of what energy is being held in the locations that we live in and we visit, and that energy can be past energy of people who've lived there or things that have happened, but it can also be the elementals talking, and the realms, the other kingdoms that are interlaid within ours that are distressed or unhappy, as well as it can be overhead pylons and energy lines, energy sources, generators that just aren't harmonious. So we can have all sorts of geopathic stress on us at all times, and it's a very interesting subject. So you can be geopathically empathic. You can also be a plant empath. So some people are very aware of the feelings of plants, and I think that's important. We need people like this. Often they're elementals, or their soul comes from an elemental source or an elemental incarnation here on Earth. And they're very fascinating people because usually, hopefully, they're drawn to become like gardeners or activists or people who, work with herbal medicine and, or even, cooks, people who create with food and plants that come from the earth. So they are fascinating plant empaths, and they'll be able to tell you how a plant is feeling, be able to communicate it with you, and it gives us great insight into how our behaviour as humans affects the plant kingdom. So in the same light, we can have animal empaths, and animal empaths, are beautiful beings being able to really understand and feel the expression, the communication of animals. And once again, like the plants, this gives us great insight into what the animal kingdom thinks and feels and the wisdom it holds, and brings it into our domain to understand and to act upon, I guess. Now, I experience empathy with animals when I often meet pets. This is the classic one. I found that when I was younger, and now, that if a pet lives in a house and then it comes to greet me if I go and visit for a cup of tea, it will begin to communicate and download through thoughts and feelings all the things that that's going on in the house, all the things that's worrying its owner. Usually, animals take on so much of our own stress, and they help us process energy like you wouldn't believe. This is why a lot of them become sick, and they do that for us, so that we don't have to. And being an animal empath is more and more common, and less and less strange. So I would love to hear from people who are having experiences like that. So you can also be like a claircognizant or intuitive empath. So that means like people who are empathic to the energy around others, and often this can be an ancestral connection, like if we're carrying all sorts of energy that is not necessarily our soul light, which a lot of us have been and are in the 3D. And you know, claircognizant, they can sort of feel and become aware of energies around you that they then experience themselves, and they'll be able to communicate with you. So, I did get the definition. Shall I read it for you now? So, an empath is the person with paranormal ability to perceive the mental and emotional state of another individual. And I also had this question, like, is it rare? And an empath can literally feel what another person feels. And I find it so interesting that people think this is rare, because, you know, virtually everyone I know has this ability to be incredibly sensitive. I just think that some people get so traumatized that they block it off, they cut it out. And I really think it depends what's encouraged in families, because if you're in a family where nobody is in touch with their emotions, then you're going to naturally cut off from using that, because if you express your emotions and you're shut down, you're not listened to, you're not heard, then just eventually you just think, oh, why would I bother? I mean, in the same light that, you know, if you tried hearing there was nothing to listen to, over time your ears would just probably shut down and think, well, what would be the point? It's the same. If we don't use a part of ourselves, or it's not encouraged, embraced, and celebrated, then often we don't see the value in it, so we kind of ignore it. But there are all these types of empathic individuals out there, and I really do consider it is like a superpower. What did this say? A paranormal ability to perceive. Yeah, well, maybe it is, but I don't think it's that unusual. I think it's part of the human condition, and actually a part of our makeup, and it gives us the ability to be human in a very considered and sensitive and loving way. And it's needed on this planet. So thank you for listening. I will be uploading more podcasts. Please connect with me on earthmotherstarchild.co.uk, and I'm on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram as Earth Mother Star Child. Thank you for listening. Namaste.